If you make music and simply do not know where to begin when it comes to getting those first few streams on Spotify, this video might just help you out. What's happening, people? It's your boy, yours truly, CC. I'm a music producer and artist, and since releasing my first song in 2021, I've gone on to release dozens more singles and have amassed millions of streams on Spotify. Now, the purpose of this video in particular is just to focus on those initial stages of Spotify growth. So we're looking at what we can do to really kickstart our profile and feed some positive data to the algorithm. Now, I specialize in lo-fi hip hop and chill beats, and so that's what I'm going to be using as an example for this video, but many of the tips I'm going to share are going to be transferable to any genre. So whether you're thinking of releasing your first song and you just don't know where to start to get listeners, or you've been releasing music for a while and are really wondering where you can get a listenership from, I'm confident that you'll be able to use some of the tips in these videos and kickstart growth into your Spotify profile. So one of the most important things when it comes to understanding Spotify is understanding playlisting. Now, whilst editorial playlists are a great source of streams, there's very little you could do to control the outcome whether you're selected on one of these or not. Outside of pitching to music on Spotify for artists, there's not really much you can do. So what I'll do is talk about the two playlists that you can have some influence on that can get some streams on your profile and feed some good data to Spotify. So first up, we have algorithmic playlists. Algorithmic playlists are playlists such as Discover Weekly, Release Radar, and Radio, and they're automatically generated based on an algorithm which is calculated based on the user's listener activity. In other words, Spotify uses the activity of the listener to try and suggest new songs to that listener based on similar artists to the ones that they've been listening to. Now, we can't control what happens on these algorithmic playlists, but we can influence them to show our music to the people that we think are most likely going to want to listen to it. And I'll speak about this more later, but long story short, if you feed Spotify with the right data, it will be able to get your music in front of the people who most likely want to hear it. And actually, understanding how to get the most out of algorithmic playlists is essential as you grow your audience, particularly if you have a hit or viral song, as you want to be able to get the most out of this opportunity to get your other songs heard as well. And so next up, we have user generated playlists. So these are playlists that are created by users and they can modify them as they see fit. Now, there are millions of user generated playlists and they actually can be made public, so other people can listen to your public playlist if you make one. And they can actually grow to become very, very popular. In fact, Lo-Fi Girls, Lo-Fi Beats to Study To or Relax To playlist has over 7 million followers and one of the most popular user generated playlists on the platform. Now, just because a playlist is public, it doesn't mean that you can submit it and get your music onto it. So it's important that you can understand what playlist you can submit your music to and how you can do so. Now, for myself, I use platforms such as Daily Playlists and SoundPlay, and they really helped me find the kinds of playlists that I'd want to be submitting to. And again, as I say, you can't necessarily expect to be getting millions of streams from this strategy, but it certainly can get you those first few streams and help feed Spotify some data that can help show your music to more people. Now, there's really a lot you can cover when it comes to Spotify playlisting, so if this is a topic that you'd like me to cover in more detail, just drop a comment below and I'll try and make a video on that as well. But before we move on from Spotify playlisting and user-generated playlists as a whole, I would want to talk about something very important that you should be aware of, and that is the issue of fake streams. So I'm going to create a scenario for you, and in this scenario, let's say I've released 3 songs and I really want to get a lot of streams, in fact as many streams as possible on those 3 songs. And let's say I decided in order to do that I wanted to buy 50 iPhones and get all of them logged onto Spotify and have them stream my music on a 24-hour loop non-stop. Now, that would actually generate me quite a high number of streams. The problem is they're not organic. In other words, there's not a human listening to those streams, and that kind of activity on your account can get flagged by Spotify. Now, this can mean one or both of 2 things. Firstly, Spotify needs clean data. When it comes to these algorithmic playlists, it needs to understand who is likely going to be wanting to listen to your music. But if you interfere with that data by having bots streaming your songs on loop, it doesn't really help Spotify do its job. Not only may you be affected by the fact you're getting these streams from a condensed source, but you may also find random things happening to your Spotify profile, such as a huge surge in followers out of nowhere, or having really high number of streams one day and then it crawling back down to the ground the next day and then spiking back up again. Such irregular activity suggests that there is some botting going on in your profile, and it's something that you should look into. And quite often, a lot of these playlists will ask you to pay money to be on those playlists. So essentially, you are paying for those bots to stream for you and feed you this negative data. It's not going to be helpful to your profile, so I'll be very careful before considering doing something like this at all. In addition to this, paying to be put on a playlist or botting your music is considered to be against Spotify rules, and this will be flagged up by their system if you do it to a large enough degree, which means that your song could potentially be removed from Spotify, or even in the worst case scenario, your whole catalog could be removed. And trust me, I've seen it happen, so please be very careful when it comes to getting fake streams on your music. Now, I know you're probably wondering, what more can you do to prevent your music from being on these fake playlists? One thing you can do is check sites such as Spotify Bot Checker or Is It a Good Playlist. These are really good tools that can give you a lot of information about the playlist and tell you whether they are likely to be getting organic streams or getting fake streams. If you're enjoying the content from this video, I'd really appreciate if you could subscribe to my channel and hit the like button on this video. It will be a great way to support the channel and help it grow and help ensure that I can continue to make more videos like this for you. So carrying on with the playlisting theme, my next tip is that you make your own playlist, put your music in it, and then put in the music of artists who have a similar genre or style to yourself and are also a similar level of listenership to you also, and listen to it regularly. This is a particularly useful trick to do when you're talking about the really first stages. Say you've just put your song on Spotify and you just want to get some activity on your profile and understand how you can get the ball rolling. By listening to your own music, you're of course going to be giving yourself your streams, but by listening to the music of yourself and the other artists in the same playlist, you're telling Spotify that you two artists are affiliated by your genre. In other words, Spotify is going to be able to use this data to suggest people who listen to their music to your music as well, and vice versa. This is a really great way to trigger the algorithm into suggesting your music to other people who they think will like it. And if you decide to make that playlist public, you could potentially be benefiting from people listening to your music through that playlist. So it could work out really well. Now, before I move on from Spotify playlisting, I would like to make it clear that whilst it can be a really good tool to help you get those first few thousands of streams, it's not necessarily something you're going to be using in the long term to really cement audience growth on the platform. As such, this isn't something I would recommend using in isolation as your solo music marketing strategy. You should still be focusing on social media marketing and running ads if that's the kind of thing that you would like to do. But do not use this as your one source of trying to grow on Spotify, but rather see it as a way to kickstart growth on your profile and feed some data to the algorithm to help suggest who your music should be released to. Now, my next tip is that you should be releasing music consistently. Now, this is something that you'll hear all artists telling you and many music creators as well, quite simply because it's so true. You cannot understate how important it is to release music consistently when it comes to growing on Spotify, because it's a really great way to get the most out of the algorithmic playlists that are available to you. As I said earlier, the algorithm needs data, and so you need to be putting out music so it knows that it can suggest more than just one song that you'll have on your profile. You want to be releasing music consistently so that each time one of those new songs comes out, Spotify will be able to direct it towards the listeners that they think are most likely going to want to hear that song. And secondly, when you're starting out making music, it's just really good to be able to get used to flexing that muscle and being in a cycle of releasing music. And when it comes to making music in this day and age, consistency is more important than ever. You really need to be able to hold the attention of your audience, and by releasing music consistently and feeding music to the algorithm, you'll be able to give yourself the best chance of doing so. And especially if you have a hit song or a viral song that goes viral, you want to be able to make the most of playlisting to be able to capitalize on that opportunity. Now, my next tip is one that I actually don't hear spoken about that much, and maybe because it can be quite difficult to achieve, I would still recommend trying to do this. And this is getting Spotify followers on your profile. Now, for those who don't know, having followers on Spotify basically means that whenever you release new music, your music is guaranteed to land in their release radar when the next Friday comes around. Now, that means that if you have 1,000 followers, that's 1,000 people who will have your song in their release radar, and that is a very popular playlist on the app. There's a good chance your music is going to be heard. You can also appear on someone's release radar even if they're not following you, and that once again will be triggered by these algorithmic playlists, and they're going to suggest music that they think you're going to want to hear. And again, effective playlist marketing can really help tell Spotify who is going to be likely to want to listen to your music. But in order to make sure the song does land on someone's release radar, you do need to make sure you pitch it at least 7 days before it's released through Spotify for Artists. Don't forget that. Now, that all sounds great, but the truth is getting a Spotify follower can be a little bit difficult. So you may need to get creative in how you're going to pick those followers up. And so what I did was, I did what I suggested to you guys. I made a playlist, I put my music on it, and then I found other artists who made similar music to myself, but also had a similar listenership level to myself. And I put them on the playlist and I listened to it regularly. And essentially what happened was, because those artists also had low listenership like I did, They went on to share the playlist onto their socials, and then other artists who weren't on that playlist and were in the same field as us decided to pitch their music to myself. Now, once I started getting these requests, I figured that I could, get something out of it for myself as well, and so I created a follow gate. So that's what I did, but really you can be as creative as you like. Essentially, you just want to make sure that you're focusing on what value you can provide to someone, which is going to make them want to click and follow your Spotify profile. At the end of the day, it's not really a big ask from yourself, but people won't do it unless you give them a really good reason to. And my final tip for you guys is that you collaborate with other artists. Now, this isn't something that I would suggest just at the beginning, but as you continue to make music and your audience grows, I do think it's important that you collaborate with artists who are not just in a similar genre and have a similar style to yourself, but also at a similar listener level to yourself as well, as that's the best kind of data to tell Spotify who to suggest your music to. But the main reason why this is such a good tool is because by collaborating with similar artists, you're going to be putting yourself in front of their audience as well as your own. And so if you make similar music to that artist, that listener is likely to going to like your music as well. And so they'll be clicking on your profile and trying to hear some of your other music. And so the more people that you collaborate with, the more audiences you can expose yourself to. So it's a really great tool and a great habit to get into. So in summary, these are my tips to help kickstart some growth in your Spotify profile and get those first few thousand streams. Make sure you get the most out of Spotify playlisting. Make sure that you're releasing music consistently. Try to get some followers onto your Spotify profile. And finally, make sure that you collab with other artists within a similar genre to yourself, and ideally with a similar listening level to yourself as well. Now, I'll be the first person to tell you that these methods aren't the only ways you can get 1,000 streams on Spotify, and I'll also be the first person to tell you that they are not to be used in isolation, and they should not replace social media marketing or running ads if that's something that you want to do. But rather, this should just be a simple way to help you understand how Spotify works, and as your audience grows, you'll be best equipped to know how to capitalize from this. So many thanks for watching. I do hope that you're able to apply some of the tips from this video to kickstart your Spotify growth, and I'll see you in the next video.